Everybody. Now I'm going to talk about how to protect your plants from frost by building a low tunnel. So first I'm going to talk about the fabric row cover that we use to protect from frost. What we have here is a light spun-bound plastic-based fabric, often called floating row cover. Some people refer to it by brand names like Rime or Agrabah. Basically, this just acts as a light blanket to protect the plants from frost. And you can take this material, it's available in all sorts of different grades. This material, this grade in particular, is good, will protect about 2 to 3 degrees of frost. So you would be good down to 30 or 29 degrees as long as you're covered up with this. So while you can lay this row cover directly on top of plants to protect them from frost, what's an even better way is setting up some hoops to suspend the row cover over your garden bed and make what we call a low tunnel. So in order to create the support for that, we have a few different types of hoops here. Now the ones that I use primarily on our farm are these fiberglass hoops here that are coated with plastic. They're nice and flexible, and you put them in by just inserting one side into the soil like that, and then bending the other side over and putting it into the other side of your garden bed. Now with all these hoops, you have to make sure that they're far enough into the soil where they're not going to come out with wind or something pushing up against them. So you should be able to test them like this and have them not come out. These are available. We buy them from Seven Springs. You have to specially order these from garden supply stores. Whereas products like this are a little bit more available. These are metal hoops that we make out of number 9 wire or slightly thicker. These work as great hoops as well. They can be installed in much the same way. One end in one side of the bed, other end in the other side of the bed, giving you a little bit of a smaller tunnel than these big hoops. And then finally, you can use PVC or some sort of flexible plastic piping like this. This is 1/2 inch pipe that you can get from a local hardware store. Usually it comes in coils of about 50 feet or so. These hoops themselves I've cut to be about 5 or 6 feet long. So you'll get quite a large number of hoops out of 50 or 100 feet. So to get these into the ground, if your soil's nice and loose like we have in this raised bed, they should just push into the ground, into the soil, like that, and hold their shape pretty well. So you can see how using multiples of these hoops, we create a whole tunnel for our raised bed here. So I'm going to put in the rest of the hoops here, and then we'll show what it's like to cover up the whole tunnel. Okay? So you want your hoops to be spaced pretty closely together. When we're out in the field, on the farm, we usually go 5 or 6 feet apart, but if you're using a raised bed like this, it might be a good idea to stick to maybe 2 or 3 feet apart. It also depends on how windy it is out in the field. So if you're in a nice protected area like we are right now, you might not need quite as many hoops as this, but we're setting it up so there are plenty of hoops, plenty of support. Okay, now we have all of our arches up. We can drape over the row cover to protect our plants from frost. So When you're handling this fabric, you have to be a little careful because it is really light and easy to tear, especially the lighter grade stuff. So just drape it over the hoops like so. After you get it up on the hoops, the next step is trying to center the row cover on your hoops as best as possible. Hey everybody, in this part of the video I'm going to talk about how to build yourself a mini greenhouse. So this space can work really well for little plants that you're starting as seeds to grow up as transplants like I have right here. You can also set this up in the field. It's a pretty versatile system. So I'm going to talk about the main components of it and then we'll go ahead and build the tunnel and show you what it all looks like. So what we're trying to accomplish is setting up another low tunnel here using rebar as our ground anchors. We're using, again, this black poly tubing for our hoops. And in this case, instead of using row cover, we're using greenhouse plastic to cover the whole tunnel. So again, this is something where you can buy the materials at your local hardware store. You don't have to order anything specially online to accomplish this. So if you've got a frost coming in and you're starting to get worried that your plants in the ground or otherwise outside might not be able to make it through, you can always rush to the store and get this stuff pretty quickly. So yeah, I cut this rebar into 18-inch pieces and 18-inch long pieces. And I use this sledgehammer here to very carefully knock them into the ground, leaving about 10 to 12 inches still above ground. I have these pieces of rebar 3 feet apart, so my tunnel is going to be 3 feet wide. And then I have the posts apart about every 18 inches to 2 feet, okay? So you can create it, you can make the tunnel wider for yourself if you have longer hoops, or you can just make these tunnels as long as you like as well to accommodate whatever growing space you really need. So finally, on the ground here, I have this black woven ground cover, okay? And this works as a weed barrier. It will prevent the grass from growing up and kind of interfering with your seedlings or your other plants. It will also cause the soil temperature to get up higher because it's black and dark, so it will hold more heat in. It will gather more heat during the day and also release more heat at night. Okay, so first, when you lay down your plastic, you want to make sure that it's secure. And what I typically do is use these 6-inch U-pins and go along and secure it on the side just by taking the staple and carefully pushing it into the soil, like so. Okay? And then after you've got all your rebar pieces in the ground, you can start using your hoops to span the width of your tunnel. So these are going to require you wiggling them around a little bit, but they should slide over fairly easily and give you a really solid hoop. Okay, so we'll just cover up the rest of these pieces of rebar with hoops. Again, these pieces of rebar are 3 feet apart from each other width-wise. And these hoops themselves are about 5 to 6 feet long. Okay, after we have our hoops in place and we've got a real steady support system, it's time to cover up the tunnel. Now in this case, we're going to be using greenhouse plastic, but you could easily go to the store and get yourself clear painter's plastic as well, and that will work just fine and in a similar way. The main difference being that the greenhouse plastic is higher quality and it's treated for UV protection, so it'll survive outside longer than the painter's plastic might. Painter's plastic will last about 1 season before it starts to fall apart. Okay, so again, we've got our little seedlings in here. Time to cover them up. So this plastic is about 10 feet wide, and that gives us plenty of overlap on the sides to make sure it's weighed down. So we want to try to get our plastic as centered as possible. And again, you can also put row cover over. In this case, we're trying to have it be more like a greenhouse and pick up more heat. So we're using plastic, but you could easily cover with anything you like. So try to get our plastic straightened out a bit. And now we can make sure that it's weighed down first on the ends. And then going through and weighing down the sides as well. Now, this type of plastic tunnel will pick up a good bit more heat than something covered up with row cover. And while this tunnel will only protect you from about 5 to 6 degrees of frost at night, during the daytime while the sun is shining, and especially if you have this black plastic down, it might pick up 10 or even 15 degrees. So make sure that if you are covering up your plants in this way, during the day when the sun comes back out, you're going to want to uncover this tunnel. That way everything isn't getting too hot in there. But this is a really effective strategy for a home gardener who doesn't necessarily have a greenhouse space, designated space like we have back here and on the other farms. So you can build something like this pretty simply and actually fit quite a few transplants in there, or potted plants if you have them going on early. So I hope this helps everybody. It definitely has saved me from a few close calls with frost when I got a little too excited early on in the season.